My lords, we are really lucky right now that we live in a democracy, that people are able to freely express their opinions, whether we agree with them or not.
No other city before London had done anything like this, and it just means that the whole future of the Olympics and Paralympics is set at a new level.
Tanni, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us. First of all, I want to start with your childhood. Tell me what those early years were like.
So I was born with spina bifida, and I could walk a little bit when I was young, not very well. My legs never really developed or grew properly. So I fell over a lot, I remember that. And as I grew, my spine collapsed, and it was my own vertebra that severed my spinal cord. And it's interesting how people treated me differently and then told my parents all the things that I would never do because I was paralysed. But my parents just didn't treat me any differently and brought me up to believe I could do not quite whatever I wanted, but I should still have aspirations to work and get an education and do these things. So very, very lucky that my parents saw beyond all the negativity that they were told about my impairment. So I grew up in a sporty family. And was encouraged to be physically active, and there was lots of reasons I was lucky. My dad was an architect. He knew how inaccessible the world was because he helped build it, and he realised physical activity was my sort of route through to independence.
Your parents sound like they were a really big influence on you, but they were also keen that you should have the opportunity to have a mainstream education. What was school like?
So I'd gone to mainstream primary school, and that was because I could walk when I started school. And then when I became a wheelchair user, I should have been taken out and sent to a special school. And the upshot of it was basically my father threatened to sue the Secretary of State for Wales over my right to go to a mainstream school. And so eventually, I mean, it was probably 9 or 10 months. So I didn't miss a school year, which was really lucky. But my parents got me into mainstream ed, and nowhere near where we lived, so there was a social side that I missed out on, but I'd do it again because the school I could have ended up in, I would never have done A-levels, I would never have gone to university, and I would never have had my career in sport. So, you know, the fact that my parents saw that and had the ability to have the fight and weren't afraid to have the fight was instrumental in the whole of the rest of my life.
And I suppose a lot of people still struggle to get those opportunities, if they're in any way different.
I mean, absolutely, people still struggle with those. You know, I still deal with a number of cases every year about, you know, disabled children in education. The world's moved on, but it hasn't moved on nearly, you know, far enough in terms of what we sort of would expect or hope for. So politics, not necessarily party politics, but politics of change, was always something that really interested me. And it was probably inevitable that I'd end up in politics somewhere. And apparently my dad told me when I was 21 that I was going to end up in the House of Lords, but I don't even remember that conversation. So when I got here, his response was, well, I knew you were going to do that, so I expected nothing less, is what he said.
Tell me how you got the name Tanni.
So Tanni's a completely made-up name. I was christened Caris, which I've got an older sister, and apparently when she was told there was going to be another baby, she was very excited, until I got home from hospital. And then she apparently stood next to the cot and just went, ugh, it's tiny, a lot, and just kept saying, it's tiny, it's tiny, it's tiny, until it became Tanni. I mean, to be fair, it could have been a lot worse. So Tanni's not too bad.
Tell me how you first got involved in sport.
I mean, as a child, I grew up watching a lot of sport because my parents loved it. If I had the choice between doing it or watching it, I would do it. And very competitive. That was always there, and it was about finding the right sort of outlet, I think, in terms of being able to express myself. And through sport, through wheelchair racing, I was able to kind of express sort of me as an individual. And I wasn't great for the first 4 or 5 years that I competed, but I found a club and some training partners and learnt. I was pretty much under the radar. And I think as a young athlete, that's really important because we put a lot of pressure on young athletes to be talented, to be good, to shine early. And I think that's really difficult when you're a teenager because actually a lot of the time you don't live up to those expectations. So for me, not being in this huge pressure, by the time I started becoming good, I knew it was something that I really wanted to do. And that protection, I think, really helped me very much at a young age.
What was it like when you won your first medal at the Olympics?
It was amazing. I mean, it was Seoul, 88. I won a bronze medal. Best race I'd done to that point, you know, timed it. I mean, 400 metres is a brutal event. You can time it really well and you can time it really badly. And it was a big step up in performance as well, a big personal best for me. And it was one of those things that really motivated me. And I've had to pick my top 10 races. That 400 metres in Seoul would be absolutely near the top of the list.
At the same time that you're performing at this world-class level, you're also studying. How on earth did you combine those two and juggle everything?
I didn't always get the balance right in terms of studying and competing. But I think it's important that you do other things while you're training. So while I was at university, I went to compete at the Commonwealth Games, which were in New Zealand. And I was given permission to be away from university for a week, to fly there, compete and come back, and travelling with a bag of books on the plane. I remember I read Perestroika on the plane going to New Zealand. So, you know, that gives you a lot of focus because, you know, I didn't have loads of time to acclimatise and get ready. You know, you just had to go there, do the race, read a whole ton of stuff on Russian politics and write an essay and come back. So I think those things helped me find focus later on in my career.
What were your ambitions at the time, and particularly when you finished your degree? What did you want to do?
When I finished my degree, I was very clear that I was never going to work in politics. I did say to my head of department that politics was for losers. So that was interesting many years later when that's where I ended up. I graduated in 91, and at that point it was about training for Barcelona, Paralympics, having a year as a full-time athlete, and then seeing what happened.
Talk to me about your move into TV presenting. How did that happen, and did you feel like it came naturally when it did?
When I was competing, I just had the opportunity to do other things, and again, really good advice when I was young was just try stuff. You know, don't sit on the outside and say I don't want to do it. So yeah, I got to do lots of TV and radio, and it was good to have other things to do to kind of balance training and competition. So had a lot of fun. I worked for a long time on consumer affairs program, and then did local radio, and it was kind of good fun.
One of the other things that you've done a lot of as well is working for lots of different sporting associations, but I'd love to know more about the Sports Wales board.
So I've recently been appointed as chair of Sport Wales, and for me it's kind of completing a circle because I sat on, it was then called the Sports Council of Wales, in my early 20s. So to have the opportunity, pretty much 30 years later, to kind of chair that organisation is really exciting. I mean, massive responsibility, but really exciting in terms of putting something back into Welsh sport.
Looking back to 2012, during the Olympics, you were heavily involved here in London. What was that experience like?
2012 was amazing. You know, Olympics and Paralympics, and I got involved right at the beginning of the bid, and then was in Singapore for, you know, the announcement, and then worked on games delivery. An incredible 10 years of my life. Again, learned a lot about different things. The games were stunning. I mean, both Olympics and Paralympics. You know, London just raised the bar. But I guess my challenge is that, you know, a number of people who work in sport will say 2012 changed the world for disabled people. Well, it changed the world for some Paralympians, and it provided incredible inspirational moments. But the reality is, I can only get on a third of London tube station, so it didn't change the world that much. And so it was a wonderful moment in time, but it just highlights how much more we still have to do to have disabled people genuinely included as part of society. An amazing moment with Jeff Ennis winning on Super Saturday. It was an incredible games, but if you look at the physical legacy of the games now, it's amazing. You know, all the different venues we have here, all the different businesses. I mean, you've got the BBC Orchestra here, the V&A, UCL, the new housing, Bobby Moore School. I mean, the list is just endless in terms of the things. You know, a lot of those things were planned around the time of the bid, but then actually what people have done is they've seen what the park is and want to be here as well. So it sets a really important blueprint, I think, for future games. I mean, the pool here is just an incredible legacy. Swimming is such an amazing sport in terms of how it brings everyone in, whatever age you are. You know, you can use it to be physically fit and healthy, and then if you want to sort of progress up the rankings. For me, it was one of the first sports I did. I was completely rubbish at it, but it just opens people's sort of minds to the things they can do. It is just an incredible way to get active. And one of the really great things that's come out of the games now is the programme that's running here, where competing athletes and those retiring are actually getting back into coaching. This is the kind of the legacy that a lot of us really imagine the games would bring.
You're also heavily involved in charities. What sort of interests do you have? What are the things that are driving you?
My work with charities is about trying to give opportunities, mostly to people who don't have them. So whether that's young people or women or disabled people or the intersectionality of all that, it's, you know, I was very lucky that I had the opportunity to do loads of things as a child and as a teenager and as an adult. And I just think if we're able to open up people's minds to the things they can do, especially with children and young people, if you constantly tell them the things they can't do, or they're bad, or they're a waste of space, they believe it. And we're just wasting a massive amount of talent of young people if we don't give them the chance. You know, I can't even remember the first time my parents talked to me about going to university. I was really young. And then I meet young people who don't know what university is. And it's not that they don't have the academic qualifications to go there. They just haven't been exposed to those things. So, you know, you can learn a lot from being a trustee in terms about bringing about change. So it's all those things that contributed to me being in the Lords.
How did you become a member of the Lords?
I'm a crossbench peer, and I had the opportunity, somebody from one of the government departments suggested that I should put my name forward. So there's a lot of luck in the appointment, because you've got to fit the gap that's there. It's a fascinating process to go through. It's not like any other job interview I've ever been for. Most of it was about what are you going to do, what change will you bring, how would you affect change, how do you understand the levers of change. It wasn't about what I'd done, it wasn't about process or protocol. It was, if nothing else, it was a really good process for me to go through to think about actually what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
My lords, we are really lucky right now that we live in a democracy, that people are able to freely express their opinions, whether we agree with them or not. And this is our role in the House of Lords, is to deal with those people that write in. And lots of people from both sides have written in to me. Now, my lords, as a disabled person who sits in this chamber with a red stripy badge, I have a huge amount of privilege. Many, many thousands, tens of thousands, more than that, of disabled people do not have privilege in terms of protection. And this amendment, and what it seeks to do, will fundamentally change the political and societal landscape for disabled people. I really look forward to you supporting my private members' bills, asking for things like good education and work and social care and access to trains, which are the things that disabled people are arguing for.
Tell us about the committees that you've been part of.
The committee work is really interesting because you have the chance to sort of deep dive into issues, and you get to call people to give evidence, and you get to sense check your views. They're a lot of work, but to sit on them is really important, because the thing that gets you to the Lords, you are expected to remain an expert in. And that means you have to kind of do outside work, and you have to kind of be involved in, you know, day-to-day stuff. You know, when I talk about sport, they want me to talk about what happened yesterday and last week, not 10 years ago. So sitting on the committees is a really important part of just being connected into that wider world of sport.
Tanni, how important is it for a professional athlete to be able to see beyond that horizon of their career?
It's so important to see what's next, because actually the reality is only 2% of sports people in sport make any money. That includes football, you know, golf, rugby, the big sports that we associate with money. So it's important to think of life beyond, partly because you're a long time retired, and partly you need other things in your life. So this is Lucy, who's was a diver and has now moved into coaching. So tell me about the path that you took.
So I was scouted to become a diver when I was about 7 years old. I then had a long time competing, of 10 years. I dived nationally, internationally, a few competitions for Team England, and then I got to the age of around 16 and somebody, my coach, said, "Oh, have you thought about coaching?" And I thought, no, not really. And then he put me on one of these courses and absolutely fell in love with it. I love coaching and I've been doing it for 4 years now. And yeah, haven't looked back since. It's been great.
How important do you think it was to start coaching while you were still involved in your sport?
Oh, very important. I learnt so many valuable lessons through coaching about my own diving and about just competition routines in general and about what coaches have to go through, and it taught me so much about myself and my own habits that after I started I became a better diver for those last 2 years, and yeah, so it was great.
So what do you think of the Aquatic Centre?
I love this place. It's become my home for the last 6 years, and the people here are amazing, facilities are amazing, and knowing that all of these amazing Olympians and Paralympians have taken part in these sports here, and I'm working here and people are training here every day. It's just fantastic.
When you look back, what are you most proud of?
Well, I know I've had my best time in sport. That's well and truly done. I kind of hope I haven't had my best moment in politics yet. I think it's learning from the things you do well, learning from the things that you maybe didn't do so well at the time, and trying to affect change. I mean, if I had to pick one thing in my career in politics so far, it would be part of a team of people who got positions of trust legislation across the line for sport. So that is legislation that now has made it illegal for a coach to be in a sexual relationship with a 16 and 17-year-old. That was not illegal. You know, that's 7 years of my life, helping get that across the line. So some of these things don't move quickly. You know, there's 30 things I'd like to do before I finish in this place. And, you know, I'm trying to get through them.